Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal. A long suspense crime story inspired by real events. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The city looked peaceful from the outside. Streetlights glowed over quiet neighborhoods. People laughed in crowded bars. Families sat down for dinner after long days of work. Nobody imagined that one of the most horrifying serial killers in American history was living among them. His name was Jeffrey Dahmer. A quiet man, a shy man, a man who rarely attracted attention. But behind the door of a small apartment, a nightmare was unfolding that would shock the entire world. Long before the headlines called him the Milwaukee Cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer was just another kid growing up in Ohio. His childhood seemed ordinary at first. His father worked hard. His mother struggled with emotional problems. The household was often tense. Arguments were common. Young Jeffrey spent much of his time alone. While other kids played sports or rode bikes, Jeffrey wandered through the woods. He had a strange fascination with dead animals. Roadkill fascinated him. He collected bones. He examined animal carcasses. Sometimes he would take them apart just to see what was inside. Most people thought it was just a weird phase. Nobody imagined where those dark interests would eventually lead. As Jeffrey entered his teenage years, he became increasingly isolated. He found it difficult to make friends. Alcohol became his escape. Before most kids had even graduated high school, Dahmer was already drinking heavily. Teachers noticed. Classmates noticed. But nobody realized how deeply troubled he had become. Inside they became stronger every year, harder to ignore, harder to control. The year was 1978. Jeffrey Dahmer had just graduated from high school. One summer evening, he encountered a young hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. The teenager accepted a ride. At first, everything seemed normal. Two young men talking, listening to music, drinking beer. But as the evening went on, Hicks wanted to leave. Dahmer didn't want him to go. Something dark snapped inside him. An argument broke out. Moments later, Stephen Hicks was dead. Jeffrey Dahmer had committed his first murder. The realization terrified him. But another feeling was present too. Power. Control. And once he experienced it, he wanted it again. For years after the first killing, Dahmer managed to avoid suspicion. He joined the army. His drinking problem grew worse. Eventually he was discharged. He drifted through life, taking odd jobs and moving from place to place. To outsiders he looked like a loser struggling to find direction. Nobody knew he was carrying deadly secrets. By the mid-1980s, Dahmer settled in Milwaukee. The city would eventually become synonymous with his crimes. He worked at a chocolate factory. His co-workers saw him as quiet and awkward. Some thought he was strange. Most paid little attention to him. When work ended, he often visited bars and clubs, especially places where he could find vulnerable young men. He was hunting. Nobody knew it, but he was hunting. The disappearances began. Young men vanished without explanation. Some were reported missing. Others simply disappeared from society. Families waited by telephones. Parents searched neighborhoods. Friends posted flyers. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Still no answers. The victims seemed to vanish into thin air. Meanwhile, Dahmer grew more confident. Each successful crime made him bolder. His apartment slowly transformed into a house of horrors. Neighbors occasionally complained about strange odors. The smell was overwhelming. Some described it as rotten meat. Others said it was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Whenever someone asked about it, Dahmer had an excuse ready. My freezer broke. Some meat spoiled. It's nothing serious. People believed him, and the nightmare continued. As years passed, Dahmer's crimes became increasingly disturbing. His obsession with control consumed him. He wanted victims who would never leave him. Victims who would stay forever. His apartment became filled with evidence of unimaginable crimes. Yet somehow he continued escaping justice. Time after time, again and again. Luck always seemed to save him. One of the most controversial moments occurred in 1991. A young boy escaped from Dahmer's apartment and was found wandering the streets. Witnesses called police. The boy appeared frightened and disoriented. Concerned citizens tried to help him, but when officers arrived, Dahmer convinced them that everything was fine. He claimed the boy was simply an adult companion involved in a private argument. Despite concerns raised by witnesses, the officers left. The boy was returned to Dahmer. The tragedy that followed would later become one of the most criticized failures in American policing history. By the summer of 1991, Dahmer had become careless. Years of getting away with murder made him reckless. That mistake would finally bring his downfall. On July 22, 1991, a man named Tracy Edwards met Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer invited him back to his apartment. The offer seemed harmless. A few drinks, some conversation, easy money. Nothing unusual. But the moment Edwards stepped inside apartment 213, alarm bells began ringing in his head. The smell was horrible. The atmosphere felt wrong. The apartment looked strange. Something about Jeffrey Dahmer seemed different, dangerous, predatory. Hours passed. The tension grew. Edwards realized he was trapped. He understood that his life might depend on staying calm. One wrong move could get him killed. He played along, pretended to cooperate, waited for an opportunity. He saw his chance. He struck, broke free and ran. Outside, he flagged down police officers. The terrified man tried desperately to explain what had happened. The officers followed him back to Dahmer's apartment. At first, they expected a misunderstanding, maybe a dispute, maybe a drunken argument, nothing more. Then one officer searched a drawer. Inside were photographs, horrific photographs, pictures showing dismembered victims. The officers froze. Their blood ran cold. They immediately realized they had entered the home of a serial killer. The search that followed revealed horrors beyond imagination. Investigators discovered human remains, evidence connecting Dahmer to numerous murders, photographs documenting his crimes, containers holding body parts, proof after proof after proof. The deeper investigators searched, the worse the discoveries became. Seasoned detectives struggled to process what they were seeing. Some later admitted they had nightmares. Others said it was the most disturbing crime scene of their careers. News spread rapidly across America. Television networks interrupted regular programming. Newspapers rushed special editions to print. The world learned the name Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal. People were horrified. How could one man commit so many murders without being stopped? How could he live among ordinary citizens for years? How had the warning signs been missed? The questions seemed endless. During interrogations, Dahmer confessed to numerous murders. Hour after hour, he described his crimes. Detectives listened in shock. Many details were so disturbing that even experienced investigators struggled to hear them. Families of victims finally learned what happened to their missing loved ones. The answers brought heartbreak, but they also brought closure. The trial began in 1992. The courtroom was packed. Reporters crowded every seat. Families of victims sat face to face with the man responsible for their pain. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no mystery about who committed the crimes. The only question was how justice would be delivered. One by one, the stories of the victims were told. The courtroom often fell silent. Many people cried. Others sat in stunned disbelief. When the verdict finally arrived, nobody was surprised. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to multiple life terms in prison. He would never walk free again. Yet even prison could not protect him forever. In November 1994, while serving his sentence, Dahmer was attacked by another inmate. The assault left him critically injured. A short time later, he died. The man who had terrorized Milwaukee was gone. No dramatic final words, no grand farewell. Just an abrupt ending to one of the darkest criminal careers in American history. Decades later, the case continues to fascinate true crime fans around the world, not because Jeffrey Dahmer looked like a monster, but because he didn't. He looked ordinary. He lived among ordinary people. He worked ordinary jobs. And that is what makes the story so terrifying. The world's most frightening monsters rarely announce themselves. Sometimes they hide behind a smile. Sometimes they blend into the crowd. Sometimes they live right next door. And by the time people discover the truth, the nightmare has already begun. The name Jeffrey Dahmer remains etched into American criminal history forever, a chilling reminder that evil can wear an ordinary face, walk ordinary streets, and hide in plain sight while the world goes about its day, completely unaware of the horror lurking just beyond the next door.